a part of this meeting as well. I just want to start, I guess, with a little bit of chair prerogative. Can't tell you how nice it is for me to be back home in southern Utah and with the legislative session behind us. And I'm guessing, Senator Stevenson, you are feeling a little bit the same way.
Except I'm in your hometown. I'm in St. George.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to have you. And by the way, if any of you want to visit, we're more than welcome to. You would be more than welcome here. So with that, let me call the meeting to order, and let me begin with the formality that I think we've all become a little accustomed with too, which is reading the meeting determination. Let me go through that quickly. I, Larry Snow, co-chairman of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority Board, have determined that the March 9, 2021 meeting of the board will be held electronically without an anchor location. This determination is based on the following facts. One, Utah is currently dealing with COVID-19, which has been determined to be a pandemic. COVID-19 is extremely contagious and can be deadly to those who contract it, especially those of advanced age and underlying health conditions. Number two, the agency offices in Salt Lake County are currently in the state's high risk category. This limits the size of public gatherings to individuals within your own household and requires the wearing of masks and social distancing in public places. People are encouraged to stay in their homes. Number three, a vast majority of agency staff and the members of the board are teleworking to avoid unnecessary contact with others. Number four, the boardroom is insufficient to allow social distancing and reasonably safe accommodation of the board and the public. Number five, the board uses an electronic platform which allows interested parties to view the meeting, hear discussions, and provide written comment. Dated this 5th day of March, 2021, signed by myself as co-chairman of the Point of the Mountain Land Authority Board. So with that, I would like to excuse our co-chair, Lieutenant Governor Henderson. She is attending to another meeting this afternoon and will not be able to join us, so we will excuse her. I'm happy to and pleased to be able to invite Jen Robinson, I should say, who is with us here. Jen is Chief of Staff to the Lieutenant Governor. And Jen, we welcome you to the meeting, and I want you to feel free to participate today and share any thoughts that you might have on behalf of the Lieutenant Governor. With the legislative session behind us, it's now our privilege to return to, I guess, regular work and focus on the development of the point. We are now well into the master planning process. We're going to learn about that more today. Our board will have a significant role to play as we work towards building a framework, creating a framework, a master plan this summer. The schedule truly is ambitious. It's given the size and scope of what we're trying to accomplish. This is an ambitious undertaking, just the planning phase. And so at some point at the end, Alan may be talking to us about some intermediate meetings that may be necessary, but we'll hold that discussion till we get there. But today we'll get a preview of some of the work, and it will be really fun and exciting for all of us. We've been waiting for a long time for this point in time. So the next item of I guess business housekeeping on the agenda is to approve the minutes of our meeting held February 9th, 2021. You'll recall our friend Mayor Ramsey and board member conducted that meeting, and thank you, Mayor Ramsey. But I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes, please.
I'll motion to approve them.
Thank you very much. Motion is by April to approve the minutes. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries and the minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda involves allowing public comment. Members of the public are given an opportunity to share comments with the board consistent with the procedures that we have laid out that govern that process. This is a public project, and so we do welcome input from Utah residents that we serve. So I'm going to ask at this point if any member of the public who has joined us would like to speak within the parameters of the policy, if you would raise your hand or let me know as chair that you wish to speak. We'll have you identify yourself. I don't see any hands, and I don't have any indication that there's any interest in speaking. So with that, we'll move on to the next matter on our agenda, which is the master plan process update. As I think as every member of the board knows, we're excited to have SOM on board. And their team has been working around the clock. And I understand that to be almost literally. I talked about an ambitious agenda and schedule, and they are working overtime to help accomplish our timeline that we anticipate meeting. They have also met with key stakeholders, evaluated model projects around the world, literally, in an international scope, and conducted extensive research about our region and the development of the site. They've clarified our key vision elements that we have identified and were contained also in the statute. They have refined planning concepts for the point and much more. And they will provide an update on their stage 1 and stage 2 work. So that's kind of a little bit of a preamble, but if it's okay, Alan, could I call on you to maybe add a little more to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's good to be with all of you. And congratulations to those of you that survived the session, and appreciate all your work. We're in kind of stage 2 of a 5-stage master planning process. And today you'll hear some of the deliverables from stage 1. Stage 2 is pretty critical as we start exploring some different options for what this site might look like. But let me just maybe give you a little context on that point. Now, think about an artist that receives a commission to paint a still life of a bowl of fruit. Now, that artist is not going to go out and start looking at landscapes or doing a portrait, but very likely to start taking out a sketchbook and start sketching out some studies for what that painting might look like. And it might look at composition and putting a bowl in different places and different types of fruit and where they are relative to each other. And I think that's kind of where we are in this process. We're not starting from scratch. We've received a commission from the legislature outlining what we're to accomplish. The governor has a 500-day plan. And one of the initiatives is directing me in particular to develop an innovation district at the point. We've been hearing similar things from our working groups and from the public. And so we kind of know that our commission is to create an economic catalyst with a strong emphasis on quality of life and innovation. So now we're in that process of saying, all right, we don't have a completely blank slate. We've got this canvas that we'll be working on, but we're trying to do some of those sketches, the studies, to help us understand the mix of uses that will function best for traffic or water or air, or the other things that have been set out for us. Ways that we can provide services that may not be fully met in this region. Ways that we can advance the economic opportunities in the state. So as SOM presents some of its scenarios, think of it in those terms. We kind of know generally what the outcome is going to be, and all of the different concepts can very well, and in fact do, incorporate these quality of life and innovation economic measures, but kind of trying to learn through some analysis what's going to perform best as we start narrowing the field to a preferred vision. And that'll be done really in the next phase. And we'll be talking about it a lot more at the next meeting. So I think we'll turn it over to the folks from SOM. They're represented today by Carrie Biles, who's a partner there, Peter Kendall, who is the project director, and Aaron May, who's the project manager on this. They have been working very hard. They've been tremendously responsive, and we appreciate it. So, Peter, are you going to lead out on this today?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Let me share my screen, and Carrie, if you'd like to say anything at this juncture.
No, go ahead, Pete.
Okay, thanks. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I believe we've got it, Peter.
Great. Thank you. Well, thanks so much, Alan, for that introduction, and Mr. Chairman for providing this preamble. We are at a very important point in the project as we begin the closeout of stage 2. So I wanted to walk you through some of the highlights of the recent work over the last 3 to 4 weeks. One of the things we've done is summarize some of the key conclusions from stage 1, and I wanted to share that with you today. We looked at a number of analog projects around the world, and these provided us with a tremendous insight into what some of the key attributes of a successful innovation district are. And we've broken the key conclusions into 12 different conclusions. The first 6 are what we're calling innovation catalysts, and you can see we've listed them here. The key takeaways are in the middle column. And what we found is that all of these projects that position themselves as innovation districts really had an institutional element to them. There was some sort of institutional affiliation, whether that was a literal anchor in a building or simply a affiliation with an educational or research institution. Secondly, we found they had a unique physical environment, so a distinctive physical characteristic or makeup that differentiated them from surrounding developments. Third is highly amenitized buildings and spaces. And one of the things we've found is that for tech workers and tech companies, this amenitized environment is really quite important. Fourth, it has to have an adaptable urban plan, and that's really been the focus of stage 2, and I'll share that with you in a moment. But a plan that allows flexibility and change over time. As we all know, the tech and innovation industry is very fast moving and changes from year to year. 5 is building typologies with flexible floor plates. So the ability of a building to be able to adapt to changing technology and changing occupancy. And number 6, under the innovation catalysts, are this public-private and institutional partnership for development implementation. So that may mean a funding relationship, a development relationship, and one of our tasks right now is to investigate how those institutional partnerships can be organized. We also looked at general project catalysts. So putting aside the innovation aspect, what does it take to actually build and create a district like the one we've targeted? So number 1 is early completion of a signature element. So that really means a signature building or park space or some sort of shared element that comes in early and sets the tone for the project. Number 2 is a balanced mix of land uses. So this is a really important point in terms of the success of a district like this. So there needs to be this idea of a 24-hour or at least 18-hour community where you can live nearby, you can work but also that there's the retail support that you need for a full complement of uses. The most successful projects also deliver a world-class public space, so having a signature park or some sort of central element that again acts as an attraction. We also discovered that there's a threshold density of about 1.0 FAR, which is floor area ratio. That's the ratio of buildings to land area. To create the type of innovation interaction that we're hoping to do, it really needs to be at this 1.0 level, which is where we are at today. So this really was an affirmation of the development goals that RCLCO has set. A connection to transit, which we're also very fortunate to have. And number 6 is an idea of walkability and access to amenities. So you don't have to get back in your car to go to a second place during the day if you want lunch or to go out for dinner after work. So these were the 12 important catalytic ideas that we gleaned from the research. We also took a look at the GIS, Geographic Information System mapping in the surrounding area. And to do this, we looked at a couple of different scales. One is this 4-mile radius around the site, but also then a 15-minute driving time and a 30-minute driving time from the site. And some of the mapping and conclusions that we started to see are listed here. There is capacity for additional job density, we feel, in the site. The residential typologies or characteristics of the surrounding communities are somewhat uniform. Generally, it's single-family homes. So we think there's a tremendous market for new housing types that would serve, in particular, the tech community. We've also discovered, and I think we have heard this anecdotally from our stakeholder outreach, is that there is a maybe less retail opportunity than we would like to see in the immediate area. So we see retail and food and beverage as a very important part of the program mix. And here you see some of the surrounding retail. So providing these day-to-day retail support and amenities for the residents that live here. We've also been in discussions about what sort of cultural and entertainment amenities might be here. We think this is an important element of the programming of the site. It will be a small component of the overall program, but a very important one to bring some sort of cultural component to this. And then also entertainment. So when we combine entertainment, retail, and culture, we feel there's a place, again, it would be a small percentage of the overall GFA, but there's a place nonetheless for these types of functions on the site. We're also entering into conversations with the 2 school districts that are adjacent to the site. We have met with Alpine and we're going to meet with Canyons in the next few days. And they are very excited about providing some sort of a educational element on the plan that might be a shared element between the 2 school districts where high school students can come and get practical training. So the key takeaways from the GIS study and the surrounding context I've highlighted here in the white outline. So in terms of populations, it's generally a single family area, as I mentioned. So we think there's opportunities to touch a new demographic here. Opportunities in employment to create a new job cluster, a focused job component, which is extremely consistent with the original mandate from the state. Some additional variation in housing. We see a retail element in the plan, and I'll share with you the different scales of retail that we're thinking of. And then cultural amenities in schools would provide a complementary use for the jobs housing mix. And then in terms of transit mobility, obviously connecting to that BRT line that is being planned, but also creating a real commitment around walkable streets and walkable environments so that people can live and work here without a car. And then finally, parks and open space. We understand the public is asking for some additional open space on the project. We've also heard that there's a lot of open space in the nearby areas. So we're trying to reach the appropriate balance in terms of that. And then the recreational and trail networks, which have always been an important part of the vision for this area. So those are some of the GIS takeaways. Moving forward, we then incorporated all of that research and the stakeholder interviews that we've been conducting over the last 3 or 4 weeks. We have then began to create 3 framework plan alternatives. And we are presenting these today not to make a selection or to solicit your opinion. It's what we'd like to do really is position these as each having specific components that could be merged together into a single vision at the end of the master plan phase. But we felt it was necessary to differentiate these so we can understand and get feedback on what the key goals are of all the stakeholders. So the first one we call a complete community. The idea here is really to create a community that is self-supporting, that really serves a 1 to 2 mile catchment area around the site. Number 2 is what we're calling a regional hub. That has a larger catchment 4 to 5 miles away. So the question and the positioning was really about what the communities need nearby. And then the third is what we're calling an innovation center. And that's really taking a more regional look at what the project could provide for the Wasatch Front as a whole. So I'll quickly walk you through the 3. As I mentioned, the first one really is about this 1 to 2 mile radius around the site. What are the key needs there? And again, the general idea around the complete community is providing all of the necessary functions that allow people to work and live here to participate in this innovation community that we're envisioning. This one is based on the selection scheme that we prepared in December. And you can see here that it's organized into 6 districts focused around what we call the hub, a central district. And in this option, the open space is really organized in a more linear manner. So it's really about connection and interconnection between these districts. We have been able to map the land use program provided by RCLCO onto the site. So the brown and yellows generally represent residential land use, the blues and represent office, and the red represents retail or mixed use. So you can see in general, the office functions are on the east, south, and central part of the site. The residential is on the west side of the site predominantly, but we are looking at potentially mixing some of the residential in with a few areas of office. This complete community scheme also has the highest percentage of residential development. It's about 55%. And the reason we did that is we know from our traffic modeling that having a more balanced residential element reduces offsite travel, reduces offsite trips. So that's an important aspect of that one. We see the retail being grouped into a series of hubs or focus points that are organized around neighborhoods and development districts. So you can live in a particular district or work in a particular district, and you have some basic retail amenities close by. And then there would be a more focused community retail hub in the center of the project. This has 25% open space. And it's really organized into 2 systems, the linear park system that I mentioned earlier, but also highlighted in orange here is a pedestrian and bike corridor that links the whole project together. So this creates that walkability and movement away from a purely car-based approach. The street network and transportation network is very robust. You can see the black lines represent roads. The BRT is represented by the reddish pink line. And then we're imagining a circulator that would connect these districts together. We're also looking at significant car-free areas. So these would be the pink areas that are between the major roads. We think this is a real potential new idea that would differentiate the project from its competitors in the area. We're also beginning a test fit of the 15 million square feet onto each concept. So here you see a very preliminary idea of massing. We're now going in based on some feedback and creating some more variety in the massing so it doesn't have such a similar uniformity to the building heights. So we do want to create some additional verticality in each scheme to show where the centers are, where there might be a critical building or tenant that would move here. So we look forward to advancing these. The second concept is what we call the regional hub. This really is looking at a 4 to 5 mile catchment area. So now we're taking in portions of Draper, Riverton, Bluffdale, Lehigh, and really trying to understand what uses should be here, what the proportions of uses are that would complement these 3 or 4 key communities that touch the site. The key idea of the regional hub, again, is to provide some uses that may not be present in the area right now, but yet are desired by the surrounding communities, primarily retail and a regional park. So those are really the 2 big elements of this scheme that differentiate it. Here you see the framework plan. So the gray represents development area, the white roads, and the green is open space. And we have located a community park to the northwest that would have sports fields and provide, again, that community resource for recreation. In terms of the land use plan, the retail shown in red migrates a little bit to the south to benefit from this access from I-15. It's also on both sides of this green park that cuts through the project, this green connection shown in white here. So we think that's a really exciting idea, that the park and the retail and the entertainment and the culture can all be focused in this one area. We've also showed an institutional anchor in this plan, and the office again is in blue on the east side of the project. You can see there's less residential in this option. This is a 50-50 balance between residential and commercial. Again, same idea behind retail placement in the plan, smaller sub focus areas or local retail, and then a major retail component in the lower center of the project. The open space plan actually is shows a higher percentage of open space here, so we're at 29%. That's mostly due to the addition of this larger park in the northwest. And here you see that linear park going through the middle of the project, what we call the river to range linear park, which can serve multiple functions. The transportation concept is similar to the previous scheme. With this road network, we actually have the opportunity to create, again, car-free zones in between these major roads. The BRT would travel a slightly different path in this option. It would actually go through the developed area, almost like a Main Street BRT, and then exit the site to the north, as in all the schemes. The institutional anchor in this option is fairly substantial, but again, we're not implying that it's one institution. It might be several. There may be different levels of participation in this idea. You can also see here we've located what we're thinking is probably a K through 8 school That would be on the residential side of the project, adjacent to that open space corridor, so children could come to school on trails rather than streets if they chose to. But the entire residential area would be within a 10-minute walk of that school site. Here again, you see a very preliminary, what we call a test fit. So just really taking the 15 million square feet of GFA and putting it down on the plan, seeing what that looks like. Again, we've now come in and we're making adjustments to the building heights. This is that Main Street idea up here. You can see the BRT path shown in the red dotted line with 2 stations. And that would really get people right into that office district. So the BRT access in this option is quite good. The third scheme is what we call an innovation center. And as I mentioned, this really has the most regional attribute to it. We're almost thinking of this as a potentially a third CBD or some sort of centralized hub between downtown Salt Lake and downtown Provo. You can see also that both of those other two have strong institutional affiliations. So we see option 3 here as having a continuation of that of that institutional connection. The idea behind the Innovation Center really is to maximize economic development and job creation. So this has the lowest percentage of residential development. 60% of the site would be devoted to commercial development of some sort. So really scaling up to the greatest extent possible the job creation, but still maintaining a balance of residential and commercial functions. This has the smallest amount of open space, 20%, in keeping with that idea of maximum economic development. The open space configuration is more traditional in terms of smaller parks with connections between them. The land use allocations, you can see here, there's a greater percentage of blue, which means, of course, office and innovation functions. In this option, we've moved the institutional anchor to the south to leverage the historic prison buildings, the kind of unique qualities of that southern portion of the site, the canal. So we see this as quite an interesting innovation district. Because of the goal of job creation, we've also created a second, what we're calling an innovation accelerator, which would be in the northeast corner of the site. And then surrounding that would be more traditional office functions. This has a retail core, again, with some mixed use components, but not as large as option 2. But again, this dispersed idea of retail serving employees and residents of each district. As I mentioned, this has the lowest percentage of open space, 20%. And what we're also doing in this phase is starting to understand the different, what we call development tranches. So understanding what would need to be built at different points in the project. So what do we need to build first to get the project started and maybe begin to subdivide the land into smaller development districts for phasing and partnership purposes. So this is in progress and will be finished up this week. Transportation in scheme 3 is similar. BRT comes in from the southeast, goes through the site. Similar to number 2, it actually will then parallel a road in the middle of the project, similar to that Main Street idea I spoke about for option 2. And then it again exits the site to the north. This also gets the BRT close to the major development areas, the major office areas. And then again, a circulator that may connect the districts together. Again, the institutional anchor in this option is fairly significant, oriented more to the south. So you get that visibility from I-15 and really puts puts innovation forward as a visible element of the project. The school would again be located to the west of Port of Rockwell, closest to the residential portions of the project, but connected to the open space network again, so people can get to school without necessarily having to travel on a road. So those are the three options, and here is the massing test fit for option 3. The other aspect of this plan is a strong central park. Again, a more traditional interpretation of how to create a community or cultural hub in the project, but that's always been an important principle for the design team, is to have a clear center, that when people arrive at the point, they know that they're there, that there's something that is shared that provides that central focus. And all three schemes have that, they're just in different configurations. So those are where the three options stand today. We are in the final stages of stage 2. So we are doing a couple things with the three options that you see here. We're doing a cost takeoff. We're also doing that tranche subdivision, so we understand what portions of each project, of each option, would need to be built first, second, and third. We're also doing a evaluation matrix where we've identified 25 categories around different subject areas, and we'll be providing a evaluation of each scheme, not again to select one over another, but just to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each option. So Ellen, that's what I had for today. I also have the KVE work in a separate presentation, but maybe I'll leave it here and be happy to take any questions or open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Peter. Great work, and can't tell you how exciting it is to actually see these models and see get some vision for what this could look like. Let's go to the board members, and it's a good time to ask questions about what you've seen in these alternatives.
Yeah, Larry, I have a question for Peter. Peter, talk to us a little bit about this institutional anchor. Flesh that out a little bit for us. What is that? Is that a, just talk about that. Just a big international company, a national company? What is that?
Well, I'd open it up to, I know Aaron's on the call, and Ellen. I think it's the answer to that is yes. It's actually potentially all of that. So it may be a group of companies that have a similar mission. It might be a university. It might actually be a technical training institute that wants to do product development in parallel with an educational mission. I think one of the concepts that Alan presented to us early on was locating it near the prison site. It could also have a educational element to it. So an idea of taking what used to be a site of a prison and actually turning that into an educational component. So I think it has all of that. The land area that you're seeing here is about, I would say, 40 acres. So it's a pretty large component of the project, and could actually take 5, 6, 8, 10, even more participants in this idea of an innovation or institutional tenant or anchor district.
If I could just add to that, I think that the differentiation here is that if there could be a significant cluster of companies that are basically aligned in the same industry. I think of biotech, or think of communications, or think of cybersecurity, which is one that is floating around the country looking for a place to land. Whereas the other parts of the office park, so to speak, would have more of a multiplicity of industries and businesses represented, And you can see there still is an innovation accelerator in the northern portion of the northeast, quadrant there. But the idea is it would be less of a single industry focus, whereas the institutional anchor would be more of a single industry, focus. So there's a place for one of those if one comes along. The other comment I wanted to make is there's a danger a little bit in looking at these alternatives and thinking that, for instance, the institutional anchor idea, which I think is a really good one, a focus district, would only occur in alternative 3. The reality is you have sort of two sets of variables in looking at these alternatives. One is you have a urban design framework of open space and cores and centers and circulation. And then you also have certain programmatic components that are living in each of the different schemes. If we just need to remember that if, for instance, we like the idea of an institutional anchor, but we preferred the urban design concept of alternative 2, for instance, or alternative 1, that these are interchangeable. Some of these components, alternative 2 has a larger entertainment complex that would serve more of a regional focus for entertainment and culture. Well, that could very well occur in this alternative 3 as well as alternative 2. So we just need to keep in mind that those chess pieces can be moved from scheme to scheme.
Thank you. Other questions? I have a couple, and maybe for Peter or Steve or Aaron. That is, does the selection of the institutional anchor, does that tend to set the stage or the way the project is viewed in terms of marketing? Is it a positive or is it restrictive? Is that a fair question?
Yes, and maybe I'll jump in first, Representative Snow. We view it as a positive, although it's certainly not necessary for that anchor to be in place on day one. I think at whatever point we identify, the anchor or combination of institutions and anchors, and we might identify them, in pieces, right? We pick the first one and there's still some lane left and we find another piece that really fits together, and we do that over time. Each of those points in time, will be a net positive for the site and provide additional clarity to the market on the opportunities and potentially attract companies or other users that maybe wouldn't have considered the site or even the general location or the state previously.
Thank you. Other questions from the board?
Lowry, this is Troy Walker. I had just a question and then an observation. With respect to the school site, when you're kind of laying that framework or plan out, you're looking more like traditional, this land the school district would develop and put its school? Is that, am I hearing that right? Is that sort of a carve out? Is that what you're thinking with that?
Well, we had a conversation with Alpine. I think I mentioned we are scheduled to have a call soon with Canyon. They were very open to maybe a new type of school. They said they really understood the vision for perhaps a slightly higher density district here, a mixed use district, walkability, et cetera. So they were really excited about the opportunity for maybe a non-traditional type of school, meaning they may not need as much land as they might normally ask for. That can be met elsewhere. So I don't think it would be a traditional, say, middle school surrounded by grass and fields and that type of school, but maybe more of a slightly more urban model.
Is it, so the school district that this would sit in is not Alpine, it's actually the Canyon School District. That's the school district that would serve the site. But I guess my question is, isn't it possible that this school could be in a building? It could be in the bottom 6 or 7 stories of a residential building or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional, like schoolyard we're talking about. I think
Sure.
that we ought to look to that direction. Then my other observation was I really kind of like a mix of 2 and 3. I like the entertainment side of 2 and the innovation side of 3. So I think that's got some potential with respect to maybe those dual tracks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think Alan hit on this, but just to reiterate where we are in the process. You know, this is our sort of your first glimpse of these 3 alternatives. And what SOM is still in the process of doing some analytics on these 3, which will test certain sort of objective metrics in terms of performance. You know, traffic generation, you know, access to jobs, access to parks and open space, trails, economic value, economic development value. And so these will be, these metrics are being developed. And so the next time we come around to you on these, you'll have a little bit more information and a little bit broader basis on which to, you know, develop a, a preferred selection.
Other questions? With respect to alternative number 3, and it's kind of what we're looking at here. And I know these are just preliminary drawings, but in order to have that central park area to have any significance or to be meaningful, it would have to have a certain size, so that it's not an add-on, but actually has some desired effect. Does that make sense? And am I right about that?
Yeah, I think the scale of the park is quite important. And this, you can see there's a little scale down here in the lower right. Generally, that's 800 to 1,000 feet long on the north edge and maybe 500 to 600 feet on the west side. So this is you can think of 2 normal city blocks in size. So it really has to do, Larry, I think, with the mission of the park. Is it
Right.
Is it more about bringing people together around cultural events and, you know, weekend activities, or is it more of a passive green park where you go to relax? It can serve both those missions, but I think we're envisioning this central one as maybe perhaps being a little more active, and certainly having components of it that are quiet. But we're trying to really what we call activate the edges, which is, you know, that all of the parcels and buildings that front on that space would have restaurants and entertainment elements and retail, and maybe there's even some buildings in the park that can provide some of those services. We also hope it's an opportunity for, you know, evening concerts or weekend markets, things like that. So we're still in the programming phase for the open space components, and I think next time we see you, we'll be able to provide a much more descriptive idea of what each park could be.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that comment and giving us some insight into the scale.
Yeah.
That's at least to me is valuable, and I think to some of the members of the public who see some of these plans, I think will be important too. Any other questions from board members?
Representative Snow, while some are thinking, can I ask a question, or at least present one that has come up in some of our working group meetings?
Please do, Alan. Please join in along the way and anywhere along the way.
Thank you. And maybe this is for Aaron. RCLCO put together the land use program for this site, the different types of uses that would fit based on market analysis. And there has been some questions raised from time to time about the intensity of use, the height of the buildings. And I wondered, Aaron, if you could talk a little bit about the economic analysis that's gone into this and how we might look at it longer term.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. So RCLCO has done a detailed market analysis to look at all of the different uses that might be part of this program. And that includes projecting the future demand, how many square feet or units could we absorb per year, what types of products is the market supporting, what are the achievable rents and prices for those that an end user might pay, and how do we think that might change over time based on these scenarios and how things like those anchor institutions might change the opportunity. And one of the ways that we process this question is to say, well, where's this submarket today? How will the site participate in that submarket? And how does that broader area compare to some of these other locations like downtown or Sugar House or Provo or Lehigh that might be slightly different submarkets and have different dynamics? And we use that to inform an assessment of what types of and densities of development a developer would be willing to build today. Right, both which ones are the most valuable, right, which ones they would pay you the most money to build on this site, as well as which ones they might say, well, actually, we'd love to build you a 50-story building, but you're going to need to write us a check for us to do that. And that's really influenced all three of these programs, which we think are market supportable. Each of them has a different concept, and the concept married with the potential demand opportunities produces the programs that we've used and shared with SON. And so when we look at these programs, we're really planning on a 4 to 7 story development programming, and ensuring that however we plan the site, that we have the opportunity to go taller and denser when the market presents itself. So that's really driven by the rents and prices that an office user or a potential retail tenant or a resident would be willing to pay. And so we've done that modeling, and as we get further into these plans, we'll refine that to make sure that we're meeting the market today, but we're facilitating the ability for us to grow densities in the future. And it also gives us the ability, as we start to combine some of these scenarios, to say, how should the program change if for instance, I've heard lots of interest in scenarios 2 and 3. Okay, if we had that entertainment hub and the bigger innovation component, how would that program change, right? What would that look like when we combined those? Does that get to your question, Alan?
Yes, thank you.
Lowry, can I chime in again?
Absolutely.
When I hear the 4-story word, look, I get that we got market and all that business, but as a mayor, and there's a few of you elected officials on board, and especially you legislators, you just got done with the housing crisis legislative session, where we now have ADUs statewide because of the housing crisis. And so I look at the development and what gets built. Just north of this site is a site we have an innovative zoning district there. It's unlimited height, unlimited density. The most recent apartment complex that was built there was 4 stories. Look, I get it, pencils. I get the pencil. What I don't get is the market. I don't get the housing crisis. ADUs. Oh, we can only go 4-story. And I get. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a pencil guy. But as an elected official, and I have to listen to this crisis and watch it all go, I want to see us drive this site to make it the market. I like 3 because it's innovative and about business, and I like 3 with the 2 part left open for the market to change. And I still think we should hopefully consider some kind of sports type, major league sports potential in something like this. But I don't want to get caught in we plan for this market, because I know how these developers are. They're going to tell you what pencils for them. But this site should not be a bunch of 4-story buildings and have everyone tell us that's just how it has to be. Maybe we wait, or we do the anchor tenant first, or something like that. That's just my soapbox. I'll get down now.
Thanks. We really appreciate that perspective, Mayor. And that's our plan, right? We want to use what happens on the site to facilitate the ability to do denser, taller buildings. But that very first phase, right? If we said, I don't know, pick a corner of the site, right? Pick a building that you're looking at. If we just built that building today, we would be stuck with what the market provides. And so our goal is to use this plan and the special things that we're going to do here to drive the market to support higher rents and prices, which is what's necessary in order to support taller construction. I'm sure you've already heard the spiel from developers about, what it costs to go from, a mostly wood frame building or wood frame over concrete, which is kind of in that 4 to 7 story structure, to something that's 10 or 12 or 15 or 20. And so the key to supporting the higher cost of construction is to make the site so desirable that it supports higher rents. And we're working on that. That's kind of a balancing question with affordability, right? Because as we make the site more desirable so people pay higher rents, we definitely get more units out of it, right? If you build a 20-story building, there are more units than there will be in a 4-story building. I don't think any of us can question that math. But those units are going to be more expensive. And so I think we're going to have to keep both of those, the density and the affordability questions in mind, so we make sure we achieve all of those goals that you're outlining for us.
And let me just say, Aaron, you correct me if I'm wrong, and Steve and others, but this is all still very preliminary. And so, Mayor, your comments and input is really important in the process. So we want you on your soapbox.
Well, in fact, we're really excited that we're hearing exactly what you're saying, because in most communities it would be going the other direction. So it's now, one thing that I think could help us understand is a fairly complex topic, but RCLCO could help us understand the interaction between rent structure and building types, and the fact that when you have a certain rent level in an area, and the cost of building higher density building types exceeds the ability for that rent structure to support it. But there's clear connection points between rents and building types and associated densities. It could be we could make that a little bit more visible to all of us, so we can understand, how far do rents have to go up in order to go from a 3 to a 4-story building, or a 4 to a 6-story building, or a 6 to a 10-story building. And I think that'll give us more of a feel, how long it takes, or, what level of market motivation needs to occur to push rent levels to that degree.
That's really good point. And then let me just say this, and I've spoken to Alan about it, and Aaron Talkington, I think this is something that you're going to be helping with at some point. We're going to have to look at these financial models, the return models, that we have some duty as legislators to be able to report back to the legislature and to the citizens in terms of why we focused on a certain model and obtained a certain return. And as I've said before, it's not just about the bottom line and creating the highest density and the highest uses to get the maximum return, but I do think that we have an obligation to at least look at those and make sure that we're concentrating on models that would best, I think, serve us getting back to the citizens we represent as the proper approach on this. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. We have a financial model built that I think will be a really good and useful tool for us to evaluate some of those trade-offs, where we can put these scenarios in, and as we get refined infrastructure cost, like Peter was describing, we can actually say, okay, well, we understand the difference between some of these scenarios as we're showing them, and we also can understand the difference in some of those decisions, and how much we prioritize certain elements, whether it's parks or additional density, or transportation, or land, the land value generated and returned to the state, and jobs and other types of returns, so that we can think about, how do we find the right balance that you all feel like delivers the best overall bang for your buck.
Lowry, this is Lincoln.
Yes, Lincoln.
Did you guys say that you have that financial model already built?
We have a preliminary version of the model built using cost estimates that are representative of this type of site, but are not specific to the scenarios that you're seeing here.
I see.
And so
Okay.
we're waiting on the cost estimates to really provide you with an update on that, because we want them to actually marry up with what Great Basin and SOM will provide.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? This is Dawn Ramsey.
Sure, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm just wondering for clarification, when you're talking about the rents that you're talking about, are you talking specifically residential, or are you also talking about like lease prices for a commercial, or are you just talking one or the other, or both?
We're talking generally about both.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from board members?
I have one more. When I asked this, the board's going to go, oh, there he goes again. But I wanted to ask the SOM team, particularly in the innovation number 3 scenario, have you looked at all of this concept of smart communities? Is that at all viable? The concept of a smart community. I know enough about this just to be dangerous, but not enough. Any comments about that?
Yeah, great question. We have. I don't have the material to share with you right now. Maybe I can bring it up if I can have a few seconds. But yeah, we are looking at really 3 characteristics of the development. So one is a smart city. The second is what the sustainable framework is, and those 2 are related, but not the same. And then the third is really the qualitative aspects of the project. So these are based on the key vision elements that were provided by the working groups and informed by the public. And we actually just had a workshop last week with the working groups around that very topic, smart cities, and what sort of specific characteristics we want to bring in. The concept of smart city is a very complex one and has many, many layers to it. So part of the discussion then will be with you and the client group, the land authority, about what sort of management role they want to take on in terms of smart city applications. So, there can be very simple applications of smart city ideas, and there can be very complex ideas that require a lot of management oversight. So will probably be a decision made in stage 3 when we have a direction that we're headed and we can be more specific about what smart city concepts are used and who's going to run them.
And Pete, I would add to that there's really smart ways of approaching the master plan and the infrastructure that uses agnostic systems and infrastructure that allows you to evolve the smart city technology throughout the point over time, and allows you to always get competitive bids. And we will be talking to different technologists to get their input to the physical aspects of the master plan and what will be possible in the future. But you really want to avoid locking yourself in with any particular vendor, because you never know who's going to be the future leader. And then, that precludes you from getting competitive bidding. But we'll be weaving the ability to adapt over time into everything we do.
Yeah.
Really, really good to know that conversation is in play. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from board members or comments? Well, Peter and team, thank you very much for your presentation. And as I said before, we're excited to have you on board and helping us. And so I suspect that you're going to be an important part of our agendas for our meetings going forward. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And on behalf of Carrie, I think the whole SOM team is very excited about the state of the project, and we look forward to further advancement with everybody.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next item on our agenda. You will recall in our January meeting that we had a discussion about the structure of, in my mind, of how the point is going to move forward, how they're going to conduct business. And we had a good discussion, and then we decided, based on suggestion, that we would create a subcommittee of board members to meet and make recommendations on certain aspects of an organizational structure. That subcommittee came together, and I think we included everyone that wanted to be a part of that. It included April, Mayor Ramsey, Jim Russell, Representative Handy, and myself. We discussed the preliminary recommendations during the February meeting. That's the one I wasn't able to attend, but I believe you discussed that. The subcommittee took that input and met again to refine those recommendations. And they also outlined additional questions that yet need to be answered. Aaron helped facilitate those discussions and incorporated the subcommittee ideas into a draft business plan, and also, I believe, incorporated the comments that were made by the board generally. Aaron, we're again happy to have and pleased to have you as part of our process. We're pleased to have you as a consultant, and with that, I'd like to turn some time to you, and I'd also invite members of the subcommittee as part of Aaron's presentation to add your own comments. So Aaron, are you okay if you take some time on that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to the whole subcommittee that I think we met 3 times to dig into these different topics. And your input was really invaluable. And I hope that you see it reflected in the Word document that was shared as the draft plan, as well as in this presentation. And so please don't hesitate. As you'll see the topics, kind of segmented slide by slide. If you have additional comments to share on the discussion or your feelings about why we should move forward in this direction, I do look forward to those additions. So let me pull this up. So just to give everyone a quick overview, we've been talking about a variety of topics related to the business plan. Many of which started to come up in the Q&A on the different planning concepts that SOM shared. The 2 that we're looking for action on today are the role of the state and the land authority in development, and the internal organizational structure. And I think that those 2 set the stage for answering some of the outstanding questions, as well as progressing on some of the next steps that we identified for the other 4 key topics, which include the proposed transaction structure, which right now is a series of options, what we're calling the state jurisdiction and the provision of public services, which largely focuses on the question of how we'll provide public and local services for the site, since it isn't part of a service district today. The infrastructure costs and potential funding mechanisms as we move forward and better understand what those future projects look like on the site. And I know what I think is going to be this board's favorite topic, the land value and other forms of return on investment, such as jobs and taxes and economic growth. So I'm going to try to focus us first and most deeply on the 2 topics where we really do have some specific subcommittee recommendations and are looking for action, and then we'll see how much time we have to talk about some of those other topics. First and foremost, we talked about the role of the state and of the land authority. And I think you've heard this from me before. We really heard from the subcommittee that they believe it's appropriate for the land authority to take a proactive approach to coordinating future development and to act as the project's public steward, which I think many people have come to recognize is appropriate because development will really occur over many years, probably multiple decades. And the other component of the role is to deliver major site infrastructure. Not every street that you saw on that plan, but the really big ones and the important ones, so that we can segment the site into multiple districts that can have a master developer, different developers. And so some of those things might include demolition, environmental remediation, major roads and utilities, some of those really significant parks and open space concepts. And that'll allow us to have multiple district developers, that'll each take one of those pieces of the site and be responsible for the infrastructure and land development within those. and to create parcels that will allow a lot of people to participate in the development going forward, whether it's some projects built by that district developer, or other future development partners that they might transact with. And it's important that each of those developers is governed by a master developer agreement. So we make sure that the land authority retains oversight and approval. And I think that was a main topic in general in our conversations, to make sure that as development progresses, this board and the state as a whole continues to have the ability to guide the direction and then the course of development, and to make the decisions that maximize the value, both economic and social, for the state going forward. Before I change slides, is there anything that other subcommittee members would like to add? Okay. So the next topic where I think we've really spent a lot of time and got into detail is on the internal organizational structure. And we shared some concepts related to this, I think, over the summer and the early fall. And this really represents a similar direction, but an evolution from where that started. In order to guide development over several years and to manage all these different district developers, the land authority really does need to build an internal team. It can be small and it can be lean and mean. It can get a lot of bang for your buck, but you do need some employees to actually manage this and to handle the day-to-day work of working with all of these different partners and coordinating infrastructure development. So really, we don't think that's any more than 5 or 9 people over time, at the busiest parts of development. But those start with hiring a director of development and some sort of operations manager to really support Alan and advance a lot of the activity that will need to happen at the site for the next year. The second component of the organization that we discussed is this advisory committee. You may have seen it called an investment committee in the past, and we've changed that name to really reflect the fact that this is not a decision-making body. This is a group of seasoned professionals that are going to supplement the capabilities of the full-time staff, and in many ways provide senior level experience at a more reasonable cost than if we were going to try to hire those people full-time. And that group, probably also includes some people that are already part of it, like our CLCO and Steve Kellenberg, and people like Jim Russell on the board, who really have invaluable expertise, and really might have more of a day-to-day input role on certain decisions that the staff is trying to execute. And so the advisory committee's role is really to provide expertise and leverage for the board, is to help frame difficult and complicated decisions, and it's to get in the weeds with the staff and the development partners so that your time gets spent on really thinking about which of the outcomes and the options is the best for the state, right? As opposed to trying to push the staff to think about new and different things and to answer day-to-day questions. The advisory committee is explicitly not a gatekeeper. Its role is not to filter things or to dismiss options. The board will see all of the options. It will see all of the questions. Its role is to help keep things moving and to take care of some of the day-to-day things and provide expertise that quite frankly isn't present on this board today, right? People who really have built these large-scale projects and have had to answer questions similar to those that the staff and the organization will be facing. And before we move forward, any comments, questions, additions from those who participated?
So Aaron, I'm going to ask maybe a little more direct questions of those who are on our sub working group. Do you believe I could express my opinion, but will one of you speak up and indicate whether or not this graphic and discussion is consistent with our discussion as part of our subgroup?
This is Dawn. If I may, I actually was thinking, Aaron, I think you did a really good job of describing what we discussed and what the priorities were of this subgroup, and I think this is a clear way to describe what those roles are, and that we did spend 3 meetings going through trying to really refine what this would look like, and so I think you've hit it personally. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I would add in also Mr. Chairman, I think once again, Aaron has taken all the things that we've discussed and done a masterful job of compiling it together very accurately. So I think it is very indicative of what the direction of the subcommittee is and reflects our thoughts as well.
Thank you.
In agreement as well. This is exactly what we talked about. And I, had some offline conversations with Alan about, some of who those advisory committee people could be. And he has some ideas as well. And so we'll see where that goes going forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Aaron, for letting me interrupt a bit.
Valerie, this is April. I was on that subcommittee too. Aaron and the rest of the committee. I think it's really good and much of what we talked about, except I mentioned at one of our meetings, and I still think somehow our structure is still a little bit light on recruiting, like educational or firms to have their headquarters there, and we're still really heavy on the real estate and the developing. So I'm okay with this structure that we decided, as long as we continue to give the directive to the staff and the advisory committee that this whole thing is not just about the real estate and selling off a certain amount of acres or developing off a certain amount of acres. And we still need to remember the whole recruiting piece and developing the other revenues.
Good points, April. And I think you've said it well. Aaron, we'll turn the time back to you.
Larry, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Is there a spot in this advisory committee? I don't see a city of Draper, person in that scheme. I mean, it would seem to me we ought to put someone in that permanent rotation that's from Draper City, since it'll be in Draper City.
I think that makes sense and would be consistent with the discussions that the group had. We could designate a particular position, whether, it's, I think I saw that Christina might actually be on the call, but someone like the director of community development, so that, whoever is in that role, is party to these discussions and providing input as well.
You're going to need input on public safety, police, fire, public works, all that kind of stuff that ultimately fall to Draper City. So it would seem like we need to have a role in that, as we move forward, to make sure those plans are done in a way that'll work.
Right.
Yeah,
and you're doing a great segue to my next topic, which is all about how we'll interact with those different entities.
And I think that I would agree with what, with Mayor Walker and Aaron, that has been discussed, and that was the intent, to include somebody from the city.
Good point, Mayor. And according to the legislation that was passed, as you know, Mayor, Draper City will be providing all the services, and so it makes sense that they would have a voice at that level.
Troy, this is April. I agree, and we don't want to forget you guys, because I did mention in one of the subcommittee meetings, and I can't remember if you were there, that we'd be going off in the wrong direction if we had a developer that wanted to put a 15-story high building and Draper has the ability to put out a fire for 10 stories. Like, somehow we have to coordinate, and it has to be realistic. So we definitely want you guys involved.
Thanks, April.
Lowry, can you hear me? This is Senator Stevenson.
We can hear you, Senator.
Let me just make a comment. We have got, I think what we're doing is sort of hand in hand. The planning to get where we need to go has got to move forward, and it'll probably have to move in conjunction with the legislation. We didn't quite get where we wanted to be with the legislation on the Point of the Mountain Authority this last session. But fortunately, this is a project we have some time to continue to work on a little bit. And I think we are going to there will be some special sessions this year. A lot of them will be focused around money that will come with what the federal government is going to send us. some of that may be available for a project of this type. We don't know. We haven't seen all the rules yet. But I would hope that maybe you and I could coordinate, Lincoln and Representative Handy. We could kind of coordinate on what type of legislation we may need to push something through special session in order to keep us moving in the direction we need to go. So I just put that out there for everyone to take a look at. I hope that would give the mayor's absolutely right in that where they're going to provide the services for this, we need to give them the opportunity to plan properly for what they have to do internally in the city of Draper at the same time. So I think we're on a great track. I'm very impressed with what we're doing. Very impressed with all of you that worked hard on this. I've been haven't been around much this past summer, so I haven't participated in the committees the way I should have, but I plan on being on board for the long haul here. So appreciate what you've done, and keep that in mind, though, we're probably going to have to look at some legislation, interim legislation.
Thank you, Senator. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I think things are going to be moving in some ways quickly. But being able to coordinate our legislative role, particularly with appropriations, is going to be important.
If I may, this is Dawn. I just want to say welcome back, Senator Stevenson. It's nice to have you here with us and appreciate your efforts. I sat upstairs in the Senate the other day as some things were passed that you had worked on, and I just appreciate the efforts of our legislators in working to get funding that we need, the money that came in through this last legislative session. Grateful.
Well, thank you.
And agree wholeheartedly with Mayor Walker. Draper they need to know what's going on. And if I may, just really quickly as a tangent, pointing back to the last presentation that we had by Peter, I appreciate that you've talked to Alpine and that you're going to talk to Canyons, as this is located in Canyons, but that immediate surrounding area also includes a very larger, I think, than Alpine portion of Jordan. And so my recommendation would be to please just make sure that you visit with Jordan District as well. At the very least, they need to know what to plan on based on ripple effect growth potentially from this area. Anyway,
right.
That's just 2 cents, but I agree with Mayor Walker that Draper they need to be at the table. They need to know what's happening. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor Ramsey, I should have said more about Senator Stevenson too. You have been working on a lot of important issues, but your involvement here is really important. I want you to know, Senator Stevenson, that this little structure graphic that you're seeing on the screen, I think we have been discussing this for 6 months. And Erin's kind of smiling, I think, and shaking your head, but it has taken us quite a period of time and excellent discussion to get this to this point. But I've held off making comments to this point. But I think Erin has done a great job, and I also think the work of the subcommittee and the board in boiling this down and getting it to something that we can get our arms around and understand has been terrific. And I think we have landed on something that's very workable for this project. So Erin, thanks. And we'll turn the time back to you to finish your presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the questions and feedback. And, I hope as we've demonstrated over the last several meetings, we really do try to take that feedback and your comments to heart and represent that in the next iteration of the plan and of the revisions. And, all of what we've shared about thinking about the city services and any new legislation, we can update and represent within the draft business plan that was circulated. Just to highlight a couple of the other topics and really focus on the questions around next steps. Obviously a big topic is the question of how we provide services for the site. And it sounds like maybe there is some specific legislation that went through that we need to update and reflect in here. Obviously the city of Draper, as well as some of the other local service districts like schools, will need to have interlocal agreements to ensure that the site is served as state property. There's a precedent for this in MIDA, which is up at the military base in Layton, although this is a slightly different situation. And we need to set those agreements up with a long-term view that addresses, what happens when and if the land is transferred to a private entity, during the development process. And so our next step is really to work with Ballard Spar and JC to outline, how that's going to work, right? Who has the decision-making authority on different topics, who administers that decision, and who services the site, and then how do we go about, starting there and turning that into agreements that make everybody happy and whole, so we have clear plans that people can, invest in and forecast from.
Could I chip in for just 1 second? Again, this is Senator Stevenson. If you would take as your way for the state to maintain land use authority, you may want to go look at what the structure we put together between MITA and the Air Force. They technically still own that property, but it's all in the state of Utah and under, on Utah tax rolls. And so I would think the answer to that is probably yes. I believe there's probably a pattern already there that you could look at.
Very good. That's excellent feedback. We'll go do that. So that leads also to the next topic, and you'll see how interrelated some of the outstanding questions and next steps are. I think once we start to answer some of these questions, like the land use authority and the precedent that MITA sets, it'll start to give us a much clearer path through some of these remaining questions and topics. This next one is about transaction structure options. How do we interact with the private sector, and is that a lease or a sale, or the 10 different varieties of lease or sale that are available to us? I think we heard from the subcommittee that a lease is appealing because it simplifies questions around ownership and authority. There are some downsides to a lease in the private market, and also in how you receive compensation for the land. And so I think our next step is just to evaluate, what some of those other transaction options might be, and to also receive some input on those, from potential development partners that we might talk to through, more formal RFEI, or request for expressions of interest, that would be kind of a precursor to an actual developer selection process. There's additionally, the question of how much the infrastructure is going to cost and potential funding mechanisms. We started talking about the costs during the SOM presentation, so I'm going to spare you some of the details, but we have spent some time thinking about how it's funded, likely through some sort of special district or TIF or other value capture mechanism. And there are multiple revenue streams from the site that we could leverage for that funding beyond asking the state for specific allocations of capital to fund some of those projects. And so our next step is really focused around refining our understanding of the costs and the timing of the projects that we would expect this to be the state's responsibility. And we hope that we'll actually have some greater direction on that, even here in the next month to share with you all. And one of the other outstanding questions that I think will begin to be answered is, if off-site improvements are necessary, things that are not necessarily on our site, but would be changed in the surrounding area, like roads or sewer because of our site, and understand what the impacts and contributions might need to be to continue to support the development. And the last topic that we're continuing to refine is the question of the land value and other forms of return on investment generated by the site. And we heard pretty clearly that you all would like to see a comprehensive breakdown of how that ROI looks under several different scenarios. And based on the new cost estimates, as well as some of these planning frameworks, we're going to update our model and provide that breakdown. I don't want to promise that you'll have it next month, but I think you might have some estimates, and then we'll have some refinements as we continue to go through the planning process. Our goal is to use that as a tool to help us evaluate scenarios and to see if there's things that we might like to do on site, but that either don't make financial sense or that we could do in a more effective way. But I did want to make sure that we talk through, just for a second, the idea that there's 4 ways in which the site will really generate a return on investment. And only one of them is through direct payment for the land. The second one is through property tax revenue, or a payment in lieu of the revenue, depending on how the property is owned and structured. The third is an economic impact, right? Really a direct economic impact of all the things that April was describing, and others of growing target industries and future job creation, and really using this as a place that we can bring, new and different businesses to the area that will, increase incomes for existing residents and just grow industries that, we'd like to have in the state. And the fourth is through, broader induced economic impacts of greater spending and activity, just from the fact that we're building, and adding so many jobs and households here. And so there's the first item, right? The land value is something that our CLCO is going to directly calculate. The property tax revenue or an estimate of, what you would have as a payment in lieu, is something that we can estimate from that model. And the last two are things that, as long as they'll still do it, the Gardner Institute had volunteered to run as a high level, economic impact model, similar to what they'd shared with you all several months ago. And so we're working to include these items in the plan so that we can really have a clear direction on the return on investment and use that to help you all think about how you'd like to proceed. So that is really the kind of the round trip on what we've been included in the business plan so far. And as you can see, there are places where I think we have some clear direction, and there's some places where we're working furiously to evaluate some next steps and start to answer some of those outstanding questions. And I think we've already begun this discussion for today, but I turn the floor back to you, Representative Snow, or others on the board who would like to have additional comments or questions.
Again, Senator Stevens, I'd like to make a comment if I could. As I've looked at and worked with the legislature on this, it's very interesting because the legislature is divided in how we get our return back by almost the same options that you've just laid out before us. And there are some legislators that are in the development business. They think the best thing to do is move this to where it's a marketable situation, get rid of the prison, have a plan, and then turn it over to a developer and let them go, let them sell it, or basically sell the property, and the state's return would come that way. I think this is probably one of the best economic development tools we could ever own in the state of Utah. And I think we need to be very deliberate, and probably it will take some time to do it that way. There are others that have other directions they would like to see it move in, but is it worth more with tracks inside the project? Certainly. Who pays for tracks? Do we give the money to the UTA, or do we somehow develop that system and then sell the property off in a partial at a time? I don't know, but I think you're on the right track. You're asking the right questions, and I appreciate it. But I think if we divided the legislature up and asked them these questions, you're going to have darts in every one of those, every one of your proposals you put forward there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's a discussion we've been having, and I agree with you that at some point, probably sooner than later, we'll have to broaden this discussion with the legislature. Aaron, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to ask you, Aaron, to go back to the slide that lays out the structure. And I'm going to ask if the board feels comfortable with it, if there's a member who would like to make a motion that we adopt, or that you consider making a motion that we adopt this graphic and this scheme for the structure for this project. I'd certainly entertain that.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we would adopt this internal organization structure, as has had a great deal of work put into it. And I really do think Aaron has just really concisely brought together all of the input and the desire and the plan that we have, with the clarifier that we recognize, and I don't know that it needs to be written in there, but I just want to make sure that we recognize that Draper City needs to have a member that represented on the advisory committee.
Thank you, Mayor. That motion's in order, and I think your clarification with respect to Draper City can be reflected in the minutes. Do you want to speak to that motion more than what you've said?
Nope, nope, that's it. That's my
Okay.
motion. To approve this and make sure that to specify that Draper has a seat.
Thank you, Mayor. Do I have a second to that motion?
This is Dave. I'll second it.
Larry, before you vote, I wouldn't mind it written on there if I could have my piece, but there you go.
I can accomplish that. Would you like it?
That'd be great.
That would be great. And thanks, Mayor. That was a question on the motion. And who made the second? I'm sorry.
I'll second it, Larry.
Thank you. Jim Russell, second that motion. And I will place that, well, excuse me, I won't place it for a vote. Discussion on the motion from the board.
So Representative Snow, I would just add the critical nature of getting some level of approval and moving forward. There are some positions here that will need to be filled fairly soon. And I think we need to at least approve a structure that allows Alan to move forward and get some help for the work that's coming his direction.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for those comments.
It might be best to have the city representative interface with South Valley Sewer and the Water District and Rocky Mountain Power, to make sure that all those components come together, because it's going to need a lot of water and it's going to make a lot of water and it'll need a lot of power.
If I may, I appreciate that was brought up, and Aaron referred a little bit earlier to some of the other special districts. As a member of the board of the water district and the sewer district for this area, I appreciate that those were brought up, because those are going to be critical.
Thank you, Mayor. That becomes part of your motion, I take it.
Yeah, that I can support that as part of the motion. I don't know if it needs to be specified that the Draper City representative work with them. I'm good with that. That's okay with me. That's fine.
Okay, well, we can certainly make that part of the minutes. And Jim, that's still good with your second?
Yes.
Further discussion to the motion that's on the table? Not hearing any, I'll place that for a vote. All in favor of the motion that we adopt this internal organizational structure that's before us, with the additions made and suggested by Mayor Walker and specified in the motion made by Mayor Ramsey, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much, board members. I think staking down the organization structure, as Jim says, allowing Alan to begin moving forward to the next stages with respect to getting some folks in the advisory committee involved is going to be helpful. So now with that, we're back to the agenda, and we're going to take up item number 6. You will recall that we've had some discussions about the fact that it's not too far off that we are going to be getting some requests from potential developers. And in fact, I think maybe that started. So Alan has been an advocate for having an evaluation criteria for evaluating proposals made. So with that, Alan, I'm going to turn the time to you, and you can talk about the progress you've made on that.
Thank you, Representative. Let me pull this up. So as first of all, thank you for that vote on the last item. That'll allow me to start putting together job descriptions and having some conversations with potential advisory committee members, and fully agree with where that motion ended up. So we know that there will be various companies at this site. To some degree, it'll be through recruitment, and April talked about that earlier. And in fact, even earlier this afternoon, I was talking to some folks about a recruitment process, and we've got some interesting things going on there. But we also have proposals that have already started to come in kind of over the transom, people that would like to have a role at this site and some land at this site. So we thought it would be useful to have a mechanism for evaluating objectively those ideas. We sent this out to you in the board packet. I'm just going to go through it quickly, and I think at the end we'd just like your direction on whether we're heading where we should or if we need to make some changes. So the concept is that a project proponent would submit a proposal that would include information included in Appendix A of this document. That's kind of background on who they are, a vision for the site, what they're trying to accomplish, how it aligns with our vision and key vision elements, what they're looking to do, how much land, how much space, parking strategy, the phasing, and then importantly, how they're going to pay for it and whether they're expecting any kind of a subsidy for that. And if they've got a master plan, that'd be great. So once they submit that, would then go through at a staff level, having an evaluation committee that would screen those ideas, at least quarterly, against various criteria that are also set out in an appendix, Appendix B. And so we've put together this little scoring matrix. And, there are possible 100 points based on alignment with our vision, how much land they want, what kind of subsidies they may want, whether they're able to fund it on their own, and those kinds of things. We would then, through this evaluation committee, score each of those proposals and take it to the board at least semi-annually so that the board could review them and decide whether to move forward with it. If they do, we would go to a second stage where we would work with the project proponents to refine what it is they want to do, make sure they provide additional information if necessary, maybe give them ideas on how to make this better, would have them work on a return on investment calculation for us, and then again, bring it to the board for a decision whether to move forward or not. And if the board could either say, yes, move forward, or move forward if you meet certain conditions, or say, we just want to hang on to it for a while and not make a decision yet, or deny it at that point. Those that are approved would go on to stage 3, which is proof of concept. And the idea is that we then want to see if this is a viable project. We want them to come forward with agreements for how they're going to fund it, where the money's coming from, some contracts that may solidify the viability of this project. And if they pass that, the board could then move it on to stage 4, which would be implementation, incorporating it into the master plan and getting started. And then we've outlined the key vision elements here. I know that's kind of quick, but given the time we have, I wanted to just run through that and hope you may have had a chance to see it as part of the board packet. But are you comfortable with that approach? If so, we'd start implementing. If not, we can certainly make adjustments to it.
Thank you, Alan. Are there any questions of Alan or about this process? And Alan, this is something we can always bring back if we need to make modifications or tweaks as we move forward.
Absolutely.
But the benefit of this, and you, Alan, you correct me if I'm wrong, is we're not that far off before we may be getting this kind of interest. Is that kind of the urgency that's in your voice?
I think so. We've had probably 5 projects proposed to one degree or another. And I've told them, hang on, we want to have a process that's objective, it's transparent, that treats everybody the same. And so there are some out there now that are kind of waiting on this. I wouldn't say it's urgent, but it'd be nice to be able to move forward with a defined process.
One of the things that Alan has said that's really important is that we essentially treat everyone the same. Everyone, it's almost like someone that makes a request, an application for a zone change or some sort of action before local government. We have policy in place, so and ordinances that provide some consistency and uniformity. So what's the preference of the board? Are we prepared to adopt this for now so that Alan has this in place, or do we want to think about it and come back at another meeting? What's your preference?
Can I ask one question first, Representative?
Sure.
Alan, I think was to, if they scored above 70 points by this evaluation committee, then it would come to the board for a presentation. Or are you suggesting that all offers, regardless of scoring, would come through to the board?
I think the initial way this is drafted is that there would be a screening process. There are certainly some ideas that may not merit your attention. If somebody scored above 70, it would refine it and go to the board. If they scored below 70, staff could work with them and say, here's why. And if you address these factors and bring it up to a level where it's a little more of a mature proposal, then we could take that onto the board. So it's not necessarily, one shot and you're done, but it gives us a chance to make sure that the project has moved far enough along to warrant your time.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. That's what I was hoping, because I just don't think the board will have the bandwidth to look at every proposal. There has to be some process to bring reasonable proposals forward and to vet out those that aren't. So appreciate that. And I'm in support of this direction.
Thank you, Jim. Further discussion on this evaluation process? No one needs to feel compelled, but I would entertain a motion. Is this on the agenda for action, Alan? It is.
Put it for action if that's your preference, but if you want more time, that's absolutely fine too.
Let's give it a moment, see if we have a motion. If not, we'll move on to the next item.
I move for approval of the framework as outlined by Mr. Matheson.
Thank you, Representative Handy. Would you like to speak to it?
No, I think we've had a good discussion.
Thanks. Is there a second to that motion?
Second. I'll second it.
Commissioner Wolstenholme, was that you that seconded?
Yes.
We'll accept that second. Discussion to the motion. Not hearing any, we'll place that for a vote. All in favor of adopting this evaluation process, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. So Alan, I think that will help you as you begin receiving that interest. So Alan, yours is the next matter on the agenda, which is talking about some requests that you've had from developer community.
Let me be kind of quick here. As you know, we've had some discussion of this in the past. We feel that there would be real value in involving the development community in reviewing the plans as they are outlined to make sure they're viable, see if there are suggestions they might have that can help us improve those, the master plan. We also think that, and Erin outlined this in her materials, that there's value in having conversations with developers about the deal structure we might enter into with them to find the right way to ensure that we achieve the state's goals, but also allow those that have expertise in the private sector to do the actual work. The other piece of this is we want to make sure that we're not feeding any misperception that we're having improper contact with the development community or meeting behind closed doors. I know there's a little sensitivity out there about that. So we thought that we could achieve all of these goals if we have a formalized process that is transparent and open. And our proposal is that we would issue a request for expression of interest in the not too distant future, if you approve, and ask for members of the development community around the country and locally to express interest in being involved in this site. As part of that process, once we heard from them, we would set up some meetings with several of them to talk about those two issues. Look at the master plan draft and provide input that you might have. And two, what are your thoughts on deal structure? That would help get us through this summer when we have, we hope, a master plan in place. Then beginning late summer or fall, whenever we decide is appropriate, we'd get more formal with a request for qualifications, request for proposals to actually start identifying our development partners to begin some of the infrastructure work. So this first step would not be to select the specific developer that we would work with or developers, but it provides an open public process for us to have those needed conversations to ensure that we're proceeding in a practical way that can actually be built. So that's kind of our proposal, and I really just wanted to get a sense of direction, whether you feel comfortable with that approach or if you'd like us to rethink that in some way.
This is Jerry again. I think you're right on track. This is very similar again to the process we went through as we dealt with the Air Force and the company that was eventually the ultimate bidder, but it was literally a national search that we went through, and that's the process. We just need interaction on this process. So I think you're right on track.
Thank you, Senator. Other comments or questions for Alan on this proposal? So, Alan, let me ask you: Are you feel like that this is something that we need to move forward with action this time? Are we to that point? Is it as not urgent, but is it as time sensitive as the prior matter?
I would say in some ways it's more sensitive, because if we need to involve the development community and get their response in roughly April or May, it's going to take a while to put together the request, get it out, give people time to respond, and then formalize the implementation of the process.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So with that, the chair would entertain a motion for approval of this process that Alan has outlined.
This is Senator Stevenson. I would move that we move forward, formalizing the process that Alan has explained to us, and that we have that on the agenda for the next meeting.
All right. So excuse me, Senator, is your motion that we move forward and then next meeting consider adopting it? Is that what your motion is?
If that fits Alan's time frame, I think that's the proper way to go. I mean, I don't know how far down the road he is with this. What he's explained is, I think I would prefer that we do it that way, that he formalized this process, and in the same time, he could be reaching out to the development community, and that would be part of the motion.
Sure. Okay.
Try to keep the process moving.
I understand your motion. Motion is that we move forward in this process, and then we place it on the next agenda for official adoption. I believe that's your motion.
That's the motion.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Second by Mayor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor Walker, for the second. Any discussion to the motion? Not hearing any, I'll place that for a vote. All in favor of the motion that with respect to this FEI process that's that has been described, this expression of interest from the developer community process that Alan has outlined. All in favor of a motion that we move forward with that and place it on the agenda for considering adopting at our next meeting, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries, and that action is adopted by the board. We're down to the last item on the agenda. And Alan, I'll turn the time to you first to talk about legislative action, and I may join in. And then you may want to take some time at the very end and talk about possibly some intermediate meetings.
Thank you. And let me just summarize quickly what happened in the legislative session as it relates to the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. And first of all, thanks to the members of the legislature for your service to the state, remarkable service during a very difficult session. And we really appreciate your support and help. So this summarizes kind of where we are with appropriations. We were appropriated $1,500,000 supplemental for fiscal year 21. That's one-time money. We have ongoing funds beginning in the next session or the next fiscal year of $1,750,100, and one-time money in fiscal year 22 of $6,500,000. Just to give you a sense for where that comes from, Senate Bill 2 included $800,000 ongoing. That's new money. That's in addition to the $950,000 of ongoing that we received last year, and then that $6,500,000 one time. $100 is just an adjustment to the internal service fund rate, and then the 1 year in HB 3. I wanted to just point out that in House Bill 4, the $950,000 ongoing that was appropriated last year was included again this year with non-lapsing intent language. So it would continue. We really appreciate this funding. This is money that will allow us to hire the positions that we talked about earlier. It'll allow us to make sure that we're set up in terms of office space and equipment. It'll allow us to start to handle to pay the consultants that we need, some of the early developers that we might bring on if we need to pay a developer fee there. Probably not going to cover the infrastructure that we've talked about, but it'll certainly cover our operations, I would expect, for the next 4 or 5 years, about the time when we should start generating some early revenue at this site, which will head us in the direction of being self-supporting. And just a couple of other things, and certainly Representative Snow or other legislators may want to weigh in on this, but House Bill 52 provided some funding for the Point of the Mountain Development Commission and extended the sunset of that entity until 2023, specifically directing them to continue to work on coordinating among the entities in the area on transportation and shared infrastructure. House Bill 433 was the big infrastructure funding bill, and there was $5 million that was appropriated there for the environmental study and initial design work for the transit extension through the point and into Lehigh. That's very helpful. That'll keep that moving forward. I don't know much about this next one, but I saw that, and maybe Senator Stevenson, you can help, but saw in the executive appropriations list on like the next to last day, had $500,000 ongoing, $500,000 one time to the University of Utah for an innovation district at the point. I've been making a few calls and inquiries, but haven't really found out exactly what that means yet.
That's top secret. No, in reality, the University of Utah or higher education, the state of Utah is out of, we have no space in any of the parks that we have. The one above the University of Utah is completely filled. They wanted to enter into a study and look at other education opportunities and certainly meet with Point of Mountain Authority representatives as they go through this process. But what they're looking at is we're looking at higher education opportunities in the range of innovation that would fit in with what's going on at the Point of the Mountain. Commissioner Wilson, who may have a better answer for this than any of us, I'm sure he's been involved in discussions, but there needs to be probably an education, or there should be an education component of what we do out there. We have talked, I know our international group has discussed the possibility of maybe even a foreign university having a spot at the Point of the Mountain. And if we're looking at innovation and looking at the ongoing process that's taking place out there, this probably seemed like a really good idea. So we gave them some money to start looking into this. That's basically what it is. But again, Commissioner Wilson, he may have a more detailed insight into this than I have.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Stevenson. In fact, that money should have and will come to the state office. The Use actually going to transfer it this year, and then we'll fix it in appropriation next year. And that's come to the system office to do exactly what Senator Stevenson just mentioned. So
you can call me Jerry. The session's over.
Yeah, Alan, I can give you a call and talk you through that. This was with Christian Gardner, with Natalie and Neil, with that group that we've been working with to really identify what the innovation district with education should be looking at the point.
That's very exciting. That's what I was hoping that you'd say, because it's consistent with the conversations we've had with higher education and some of the planning that's going on. So that's really encouraging. Thank you. And then the last one, Senate Bill 243, and Senator Stevenson was the sponsor, but quickly it sets up infrastructure banks for the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, as well as the Inland Port and MIDA. And in our case, as we move a little further down the road with our business planning, we'll have to make some amendments to the statute going forward, but it sets up a mechanism for us to collect funds that can be used for infrastructure at the site, with a board composed of members of this board that can make loans under terms that work for us based on the unique circumstances at our site. So it's a way for us to be, I think, flexible, responsive, and meet the controls that are built into that statute to ensure accountability to the public. Senator Stevenson, what would you add to that?
Well, just quickly, we have 3 land use authorities in the state of Utah, and they are all political subdivisions, and maybe 4. There's some active interest in doing something down at Utah Lake. What this does is it gives us opportunity to put money into a bank or into banks, and if we're in the development business or for various projects that could take place in any of these. A lot of these will have paybacks attached to them, and the state should be in the loan business, or at least the screening of loans. And that's what this bill does. It just gives us a look at opportunity to look at the financial structure of a loan and why it should take place. Deals with MIDA, Inland Port, and Point of the Mountain. And again, there may be possibly other developments we will look at around the state, but I think this is probably the right way to keep track of some of these funds. We did put some money in it that the Inland Port will have access to this year. And basically, when we put these large amounts of money in someplace, we need a way to build a fence around that money so that it's monitored properly and taken care of. And that's what this bill really does. It gives us that opportunity. So good legislation takes a lot of years sometimes. I'm sure that you'll see Point of the Mountain, Inland Port. I've ran bills the last, probably ran 16 or 17 bills dealing with MIDA. And I think 10 years down the road, we'll be looking at the same, we will have looked at the same opportunity for other authorities. So this is a starting point, and we will look at the infrastructure bank again over and over until we get it right. So that's kind of the big wrap up of it right there. It's just a way of keeping track of this money until we have opportunity to get it loaned, and then have a process for getting it back after we do a loan.
Thank you, Senator, for your leadership on this and providing an important tool for us. It really does make a difference. Well, that's my report on the session. And I know there's a lot more that went on, but I'll wrap it up there.
Thanks very much. And Senator Stevenson, I'll just add my thanks. And I think Senator Fillmore, I believe you helped with some appropriation requests, and Representative Handy and I worked on some of those other issues with Point of the Mountain. So thank you for your help. We're fortunate. It's just nice to have legislators part of this board that can help facilitate what we need legislatively. So with that, Alan, do you want to say anything with respect to potentially the need for some some intermediate meetings?
Yes. So based on our schedule for wrapping up the master plan, we'll be heading probably about the time of our next meeting. We'll be narrowing the various alternatives or test cases that we outlined today into a preferred alternative that will then go forward through the process, get some public input. We'll refine it and try to make it work as optimally as possible. We thought that to get from where we are today with just a general description of some of these concepts to a point at the April meeting where we could make a decision generally on the path forward, we might want to have some time in between with the board to talk about these concepts in more detail so that you can look at the metrics that are associated with them, how they perform, have some discussion about the elements of the various concepts and the preferred urban form in those concepts that we might carry forward. So with, if you're willing, we may try to set up a couple of meetings in between to give you a chance to get into the meat of this a little bit more.
Thank you, Alan. And I just will say this again in front of Alan. We're really fortunate to have him as our director. And I realize that more and more, especially as we get into the meat of the planning and moving this project forward. CC, thank you for your great work and keeping track of what we do. Great job on the minutes. Thank you, members of the board, for being here, and also your willingness to step up and attend some of these intermediate meetings. I think you can sense that this is really large and it's important, and probably as important as any other board work that maybe that you will ever do. I hope you feel that, because that's the way I feel about it. So thank you for showing up and being prepared and for engaging. So with that, I don't have anything else. I would entertain a final motion.
Hey, Representative?
Yes, Jim.
I have my hand up. I have one other thing. I'm sorry to do this to everybody, but I kind of have a critical issue that came up today on behalf of a couple of Draper City residents that are trying to get permits. Can I throw something out there really quickly? I know everybody's time is sensitive, but
sure.
There's a current water line easement that runs from Mount Olympus down to this site. The water line hasn't been used since 1983 for culinary, and for several years there's no water at all running through it. The water shares have been transferred to DNR and then since to Draper City. But there is an issue where all of this property has been developed now, and for whatever reason, at this point, there's a few folks that want to get a building permit that can't get it because of this easement running through the property that they've purchased. And it's kind of, we're not really sure whether that falls into line of the Point of the Mountain set aside on that property where we need board approval or not. It extends from Mount Olympus to the site, and then it also goes across the site. I'm clear that across the site it would need approval there. This literally crosses hundreds of properties and would be way difficult for anybody to even consider maintaining or trying to evacuate. We would like to just be able to deal with this onesie twosie as people come across for a permit to vacate that easement. And I'm just looking for direction. Do I need to bring this back to another meeting next month, or is there any general opinion?
I know our legal counsel is still on. I'm reading. I think I'm reading what you're saying. Does the easement run in favor of the state, or who holds the easement?
We hold the easement, so it's titled
Okay.
the DFCM, and you can see this is kind of a rough draft of where it runs. You can see all the properties that it now runs through. When the easement was originally created, there was no development there. For some reason, all this development happened with the easement in place, and now it's being, enforced or whatever, where they need to have that vacated for building permits.
Okay.
And it's critical for a couple of folks there.
So I've got a thought on it, Jim. Timing wise, can we put this on the agenda for taking official action next time? Because I don't know that we can take action since it's not an agenda item this time. And
we can't.
And that would also give time for your legal counsel to work with our legal counsel, and I'm guessing that it would be an action to abandon the easement with respect to our ownership.
Yeah, I think we need to decide whether it belongs, whether the easement up to the point of the property my AG's opinion is that it belongs to the property, and that the point of the mountain would need to vacate that. So
is that okay if we handle it that way?
Yeah, I think that if that's what we pass on to the property owners, that's all we can do. But I think that that's probably appropriate, would be my thought. But
Jim, I have one question. Is there anyone that's been using it like a prescriptive easement, even though the easement was the state? Is there any like farmer, anyone that's been using it that's gonna say, hey, for 30 years I've been using this, and are we gonna have any issues like that?
No, and you can't have prescriptive easement on state asset.
If the state owns it, okay.
Yeah, but nobody's using it. The water line's been long since evacuated. It's just an easement that's existing in place. And we certainly don't want to go through and do the work to go back and vacate that with everybody, but we'd like to be able to just vacate it one at a time. And I don't really think the point of the Mountain Commission would want to take that on. So maybe Representative Snow, maybe some action to direct and make a decision on the next meeting that DFCM can manage that off the site if that's the choosing of the commission.
Well, I think we'll plan on putting it on the agenda, and in the meantime, our director Alan can work with JC and your office with you and your legal counsel, and we'll figure out the best way to approach it.
Yeah, that I agreed. The only reason I brought it up is I hate to get into the next meeting and then have anybody, not be able to address their concerns on whether it's valuable to the development or not.
I think this helps lay the foundation. So thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Thank you.
So with that comment, I would entertain final motion.
I'll make that motion while my microphone's free. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Motion is that we adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Was that Mayor Ramsey? Thank you, Mayor. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. We stand adjourned. Thank you. Thank you for being here and for your help. All of you have a good evening, and go Cougars, okay?
I almost put hashtag rise and shout in the chat. I thought, I like the Utes, and I even attended the U for a while, but there's got to be some balance. There's balance in all things, and so I'll stand with you.
Senator
That's
Stevens
right.
was on the right track. He was right on the right track all the way.
Mayor Walker, you're out of order. So All right.
Representative Snow, have you ever seen Mayor Walker's office?
Yes, I have. So I guess it's understandable. But anyway, a big game tonight, and I'm kind of divided loyalties with these two teams, but that's another story. Thank you very much for being here and for your work. You're great people, all of you. I hope you know that, and we'll catch you all later.